Hi guys, welcome back. We're reading Coraline by Neil Gaiman. There's a movie based on it that I think we've all seen. And in the last video, we met Coraline, her mom, her dad, the two ladies that lived downstairs, the old man who lived upstairs, and we also met the other mother, the other father, rats, and the other old man that lives upstairs. What was different about the mom and dad and old man and the other mom and dad and other old man? The others had button eyes instead of regular eyes. When we left, Coraline was going outside to explore the other house. So not her home, but the other home with the other mother and other father. So that's where we're going to pick up in chapter 4. The house looked exactly the same from the outside, or almost exactly the same. Around Miss Spinks and Miss Forcible's door there was blue and red light bulbs that flashed on and off, spelling out words, the lights chasing each other around the door, on and off, around and around. Astounding was followed by a theatrical and then triumph. It was sunny, cold day, exactly like the one she left. There was a polite noise from behind her, and she turned around. Standing on the wall next to her was a large black cat, identical to the large black cat that she'd seen in the grounds at home. "Good afternoon," said the cat. Its voice sounded like the voice at the back of Coraline's head, the voice she thought words in, but a man's voice, not a girl's. "Hello," said Coraline. "I saw a cat like you in the garden at home. You must be the other cat." The cat shook its head. "No," it said, "I'm not the other anything. I'm me." It tipped its head to one side, green eyes glinted. "You people are spread all over the place. Cats, on the other hand, keep ourselves together. If you see what I mean." "I suppose, but if you're the same cat I saw at home, how can you talk?" "Cats don't have shoulders, not like people do," but the cat shrugged, and in one smooth movement that started at the tip of its tail and ended with a raised movement of its whiskers, "I can talk." "Cats don't talk at home." "No," said the cat. "No," said Coraline. The cat leapt smoothly from the wall to the grass near Coraline's feet. It stared up at her. "Well, you're the expert on those things," said the cat dryly. "After all, what would I know? I'm only a cat." It began to walk away, head and tail held high and proud. "Come back," said Coraline. "Please? I'm sorry, I really am." The cat stopped walking, sat down, and began to wash itself thoughtfully, apparently unaware of Coraline's existence. We could be friends, you know," said Coraline. "We could be rare specimens of an exotic breed of African dancing elephants," said the cat. "But we're not. At least," it added catly, after darting a brief look at Coraline. "I'm not." Coraline sighed. "Please, what's your name?" Coraline asked the cat. "Look, I'm Coraline, okay?" The cat yawned, slowly, carefully, revealing a mouth and tongue of astounding pinkness. "Cats don't have names," it said. "No," said Coraline. "No," said the cat. "Now, you people have names. That's because you don't know who you are. We know who we are, so we don't have names. We don't need names." There was something irritatingly self-centered about the cat, Coraline decided, as if it were, in its own opinion, the only thing in the world or place that could possibly be of any importance. Half of her wanted to be very rude to it, the other half of her wanted to be polite and deferential. The polite half won. "Please, what is this place?" The cat glanced around briefly. "It's here," said the cat. "I can see that." "Well, how did you get here?" "Like you did. I walked," said the cat. "Like this." Coraline watched the cat walk slowly across the lawn. It walked behind a tree, but didn't come out the other side. Coraline went over to the tree and looked behind it. The cat was gone. She walked back towards the house, and there was another polite noise from behind her, and it was the cat. "By the by," it said, "it was sensible for you to bring protection. I'd hang on to it if I were you." "Protection?" "That's what I said," said the cat. "And anyways," it paused and stared intently at something that wasn't there. Then it went down Then it went down into a low crouch and moved slowly forward. 2 of 3 steps it seemed to be stalking on invisible mouse. Abruptly it turned tail and dashed from the woods. It vanished among the trees. Coraline wondered what the cat had meant, but she also wondered whether cats could all talk where she came from, or just choose not to, or whether they could only talk when they were here, wherever here was. She walked down the brick steps to the Miss Sphinx and Forcible's front door. The blue and red lights flashed on and off. The door was open, just slightly. She knocked on it, but her first knock made the door swing open and Coraline went in. She was in a dark room that smelled of dust and velvet. The doors swung shut behind her and the room was black. Coraline edged forward into a small anteroom. Her face brushed against something soft. It was cloth. She reached up with her hand and pushed at the cloth. It parted. She stood blinking on the other side of the velvet curtain in poorly lit theater. Far away at the edge of the room was a high wooden stage, empty and bare, and a dim spotlight shining onto it from high above. There were seats between Coraline and the stage, rows and rows of seats. She heard a shuffling noise, and light came towards her, swinging from side to side. When it was closer, she saw the light was coming from a flashlight being carried in the mouth of a large black Scotty dog, its muzzle gray with age. "Hello," said Coraline. The dog put the flashlight down on the floor and looked up at her. "Right, let's see your ticket," he said gruffly. "Ticket?" "That's what I said, ticket. I haven't got all day, you know. You can't watch the show without a ticket." Coraline sighed. "I don't have a ticket," she admitted. "Another one," said the dog gloomily. "Come in here." Bold as anything. "Where's your ticket?" "Haven't got one." "I don't know." It shook its head, then shrugged. "Come on, then." He picked up the flashlight in his mouth and trotted off into the dark. Coraline followed him. When he got near the front of the stage, he stopped and shone the flashlight onto an empty seat. Coraline sat down, and the dog wandered off. As her eyes got used to the darkness, she realized that the other inhabitants of the seats were all also dogs. There was a sudden hissing noise from behind the stage, and Coraline decided it was the sound of a scratchy old record being put onto a record player. The hissing became the noise of trumpets, and Miss Sphinx and Miss Forcible came out on stage. Miss Sphinx was riding a one-wheeled bicycle and juggling balls. Miss Forcible skipped behind her, holding a basket of flowers. She scattered the flower petals across the stage as she went. They reached the front of the stage, and Miss Sphinx leaped nimbly off the unicycle, and the 2 old women bowed low. All the dogs stomped their tails and barked enthusiastically. Coraline clapped politely. Then they unbuttoned their fluffy round coats and opened them, but their coats weren't all that opened. Their faces opened too, like empty shells. Out of the old, empty, fluffy, round bodies stepped 2 young women. They were thin and pale and quite pretty, and had black button eyes. The new Miss Sphinx was wearing green tights and high brown boots that went most of their way up her leg. The new Miss Forcible wore a white dress and had flowers in her long yellow hair. Coraline pressed back against her seat. Miss Sphinx went off the stage, and the noise of trumpets squealed as the gramophone needle dug its way across the record and was pulled off. "This is my favorite bit," whispered the little dog in the next seat next to her. The other Miss Forcible picked up a knife out of a box on the corner of the stage. "Is this a dagger that I see before me?" she asked. "Yes," shouted all the little dogs, "it is." Miss Forcible curtsied, and all the dogs applauded again. Coraline didn't bother clapping this time. Miss Sphinx came back on. She slapped her thighs, and all the little dogs woofed. "And now," Miss Sphinx said, "Miriam and I proudly present a new, exciting addendum to our theatrical exposition. Do I see a volunteer?" The little dog next to Coraline nudged her with its front paws. "That's you," it hissed. Coraline stood up and walked up the wooden steps to the stage. "Can I have a big round of applause for the young volunteer?" asked Miss Sphinx. The dogs woofed and squealed and thumped their tails on the velvet seats. "Now, Coraline," said Miss Sphinx, "what's your name?" "Coraline," said Coraline. "And we don't know each other, do we?" Coraline looked at the thin young woman with black button eyes and shook her head slowly. "Now," said the other Miss Sphinx, "stand over here." She led Coraline over to the board by the side of the stage and put a balloon on top of the Coraline's head. Miss Sphinx walked over to the Miss Forcible. She blindfolded Miss Forcible button eyes with a black scarf and put the knife in her hands. She turned her around 3 times or 4 and pointed her at Coraline. Coraline held her breath and squeezed her fingers into her tight fist. Miss Forcible threw the knife at the balloon. It popped loudly, and the knife stuck into the board just above Coraline's head, twinged there. Coraline breathed out. The dogs went wild. Miss Sphinx gave Coraline a very small box of chocolates and thanked her for being such a good sport. Coraline went back to her seat. "You were very good," said the little dog. "Thank you," said Coraline. Miss Forcible and Miss Sphinx began juggling with huge wooden clubs. Coraline opened the box of chocolates. The dog looked at them longingly. "Would you like one?" she asked the little dog. "Yes, please," whispered the dog. "Only not toffee ones. They make me drool." "I thought chocolates weren't very good for dogs," she said, remembering something Miss Forcible had told her. "Maybe where you come from," whispered the little dog. "Here, it's all we eat." Coraline couldn't see what the chocolates were in the dark, but she took an experimental bite of one and turned out to be coconut. Coraline didn't like coconut. She gave it to the dog. "Thank you," said the dog. "You're welcome," said Coraline. Miss Forcible and Miss Sphinx were doing some acting. Miss Forcible was sitting on a stepladder, and Miss Sphinx was standing at the bottom. "What's in a name?" asked Miss Forcible. "That we call a rose by any other name, would it smell as sweet?" "Have you got any more chocolates?" said the dog. Coraline gave the dog another chocolate. "I know not how I tell thee who I am," said Miss Sphinx to Miss Forcible. "This bit finishes soon," whispered the dog. "Then they start folk dancing." "So how long does this go on for?" asked Coraline. "The theater." "All the time," said the dog. "Forever and always." "Here," said Coraline. "Keep the chocolates." "Thank you," said the dog, and Coraline stood up. "See you soon," said the dog. "Bye," said Coraline. She walked out the theater and back into the garden. She had to blink her eyes at the daylight. Her other parents were waiting for her in the garden, standing side by side. They were smiling. "Did you have a nice time?" asked her other mother. "It was interesting," said Coraline. The 3 of them walked back up to Coraline's other house together. Coraline's other mother stroked Coraline's hair with her long white fingers. Coraline shook her head. "Don't do that," said Coraline. Her other mother took her hand away. "So," said her other father, "do you like it here?" "I suppose," said Coraline. "It's much more interesting than at home." They went inside. "I'm glad you like it," said Coraline's mother, "because we'd think that this is your home. We'd like to think that this is your home. You can stay here forever and always, if you want to." Said Coraline. She put her hands in her pockets and thought about it. Her hand touched the stone that the real Miss Sphinx and Forcible had given her the day before, the stone with a hole in it. "If you want to stay," said other father, "there's only one thing we have to do, so you can stay here forever and always." They went to the kitchen, and on a china plate on the kitchen table was a spool of black cotton and long silver needle, and beside them 2 large black buttons. "I don't think so," said Coraline. "Oh, but we want you to," said the other mother. "We want you to stay, and this is just a little thing." "It won't hurt," said other father. Coraline knew that when grown-ups told you something wouldn't hurt, it almost always did. She shook her head. Her other mother smiled brightly, and the hair on her head drifted like plants under the sea. "We only want what's best for you," she said. She put her hand on Coraline's shoulders, and Coraline backed away. "I'm going now," said Coraline. She put her hands in her pockets, and her fingers closed around the stone with a hole in it. Her other mother's hand scuttled off Coraline's shoulder like a frightened spider. "If that's what you want," she said. "Yes," said Coraline. "We'll see you soon, though," said her other father. "When you come back." Said Coraline. "And then we'll all be together as one big happy family," said her other mother. "Forever and always." Coraline backed away. She turned and hurried into the drawing room and pulled open the drawer in the corner. There was no brick wall there now, just darkness and night black underground darkness that seemed as things in it might be moving. Coraline hesitated. She turned around. Her other mother and her other father were walking towards her, holding hands. They were looking at her with their black button eyes, or at least she thought they were looking at her. She couldn't be sure. Her other mother reached out her free hand and beckoned gently with one white finger. Her pale lips mouthed, "Come back soon," although she said nothing aloud. Coraline took a deep breath and stepped into the darkness where strange voices whispered and distant winds howled. She became certain that there was something in the dark behind her, something very old and very slow. Her heart beat so hard and so loudly she scared it would burst out of her chest. She closed her eyes against the dark. Eventually, she bumped into something and opened her eyes startled. She had bumped into an armchair in her drawing room. The open doorway behind her was blocked by rough red bricks. She was home. Okay, so that's the end of that chapter. What do you think of other mother and other father and other Miss Spinks and just all the other people? Okay. Yeah, they're kind of creepy. They're creeping me out. So I'm guessing they're probably creeping you out too. Like anybody that doesn't have eyes have buttons instead. How did Coraline react when they... What did they want to do to Coraline so she could stay there forever and ever? Yeah, they're going to sew buttons on her eyes. Creepy. But she said no, and she was leaving. But she was still getting uneasy feelings from him when she was leaving. And she swears there's something following her through the tunnel. And when she gets out the other side, she turns and looks. The tunnel there? Is there a tunnel there? No, there's bricks. It's all boarded up. So, yeah. She was back home, though. That's important. Let's go ahead and go to chapter 5. Coraline locked the door of the drawing room with a cold black key. She went back into the kitchen and climbed onto the chair. She turned to put the bunch of keys back on top of the door frame again. She tried 4 or 5 times before she was forced to accept that she just wasn't big enough. And she put them down on the counter next to the door. Her mother still hadn't returned from her shopping expedition. Coraline went to the freezer, took out a spare loaf of frozen bread in the bottom compartment. She made herself some toast with jam and peanut butter. She drank a glass of water. She waited for her parents to come back. When it began to get dark, Coraline microwaved herself a frozen pizza. Then Coraline watched television. She wondered why grown-ups gave themselves all the good programs, with all the shouting and running around in. After a while, she started yawning, and then she undressed, brushed her teeth, and put herself to bed. In the morning, she went to her parents' room, but the bed hadn't been slept in, as they weren't around. She ate canned spaghetti for breakfast. For lunch, she had a block of cooking chocolate and an apple. The apple was yellow and slightly shriveled, but it tasted sweet and good. For tea, she went down to Miss Sphinx and Miss Enforceable, and she had 3 digestive biscuits, a glass of limeade, and a cup of weak tea. The limeade was very interesting. It didn't taste like anything like limes. It tasted bright green and vaguely chemical. Coraline liked it enormously. She wished they had had it at home. How are you, dear? How are your dear mother? How are your dear mother and father? Asked Miss Sphinx. Missing, said Coraline. I hadn't seen either of them since yesterday. I'm on my own. I think I've probably became a single child family. Tell your mother that we found the Glasgow Empire Press clippings we were telling her about. She seemed very interested when Miriam mentioned it to her. She's vanished under mysterious circumstances, said Coraline, and I believe my father has as well. I'm afraid we'll be out all day, Caroline. Lovey, said Miss Forcible. We'll be staying over at April's niece in Royal Turnbridge Wells. They showed Coraline a photographic album with pictures of Miss Spink's niece in it, and then Coraline went home. She opened her money box and walked down to the supermarket. She bought 2 large bottles of limeade and a chocolate cake and a new bag of apples, and she went home and ate them for dinner. She cleaned her teeth and went into her father's office. She woke up his computer and wrote a story. Coraline's story. There was a girl, her name was Apple. She used to dance a lot. She danced and danced until her feet turned into sausages. The end. She printed out the story and turned off the computer, and then she drew a picture of a little girl dancing underneath the words of the paper. She ran herself a bath with too much bubbles in it, and the bubbles ran all over the side and went all over the floor. She dried herself in the floor as best she could, and went to bed. Coraline woke up in the night, and she went into her parents' bedroom, but the bed was made and empty. The glowing green numbers on the digital clock glowed 3:12 a.m. All alone in the middle of the night, Coraline began to cry. There was no other sound in the empty flat. She climbed into her parents' bed, and after a while, she went to sleep. Coraline was woken by tiny cold paws batting her face. She opened her eyes. Big Green stared back at her. It was the cat. Hello, said Coraline. How did you get in? The cat didn't say anything. Coraline got out of bed. She was wearing a long t-shirt and pajama bottoms. Have you come to tell me something? The cat yawned, which made his eyes flash green. Do you know where my mummy and daddy are? The cat blinked at her slowly. Is that a yes? The cat blinked again. Coraline decided that was indeed a yes. Will you take me to them then? The cat stared at her, and then they walked out into the hall, and she followed it. It walked up the length of the corridor and stopped down at the very end, where a full-length mirror hung. The mirror had been, a long time before, the inside of a wardrobe door. It had been hanging there on the wall when they moved in, and although Coraline's mother had spoken occasionally of replacing it with something newer, she never had. Coraline turned on the light in the hall, and the mirror showed the corridor behind her. That was only to be expected, but reflected in the mirror were her parents. They stood awkwardly in the reflection of the hall. They seemed sad and alone. As Coraline watched, they waved to her slowly with limp hands. Coraline's father had his arm around her mother. In the mirror, Coraline's mother and father stared at her. Her father mouthed the words and said something, but it could not hear nothing at all. Her mother breathed on the glass, and quickly, before the fog faded, she wrote SUPLEP backwards with the tip of her forefingers. The fog on the inside of the mirror faded, and so did her parents, and now the mirror reflected only the corridor and Coraline and the cat. Where are they? Coraline asked the cat. The cat made no reply, but Coraline imagined his voice, dry as dead, fly on a window sill in winter, saying, Well, where do you think they are? They aren't coming back, are they? Said Coraline. Not under their own steam. The cat blinked at her. Coraline took it as a yes. Right, said Coraline, then I suppose there's only one thing left to do. She walked into her father's study. She sat down at his desk, and then she picked up the telephone, and she opened the phone book and telephoned the local police station. Police, said the gruff male voice. Hello, she said. My name is Coraline Jones. You're up after your bedtime, aren't you, young lady? Said the policeman. Possibly, said Coraline, who was not going to be diverted. I'm ringing to report a crime. And what sort of crime would that be? Kidnapping. Grown-up napping, really. My parents have been stolen away into a world on the other side of the mirror in our hall. And do you know who stole them? Asked the police officer. Coraline could hear the smile in his voice, and she tried extra hard to sound like an adult might sound to make him take her seriously. I think my other mother had them both in her clutches. She may want to keep them and sew their eyes with black buttons, or she may simply have them in order to lure me back into the reach of her fingers. I'm not sure. Ah, the nefarious clutches of her fiendish fingers, is it? He said. You know what I suggest, Miss Jones? No, said Coraline. What? You ask your mother to make you a big old mug of hot chocolate and then give you a great big old hug. There's nothing like a hot chocolate hug for making the nightmares go away. And if she starts to tell you off for waking her up at this time of night, why you tell her that's what the policeman said. He had a deep, reassuring voice. Coraline was not reassured. When I see her, said Coraline, I shall tell her that. And she put down the telephone. The black cat, who had sat on the floor grooming his fur through his entire conversation, now stood up and led the way into the hall. Coraline went back into the bedroom and put on her blue dressing gown and her slippers. She looked under the sink for a flashlight and found one, but the batteries had long since run down, and it barely glowed with the faintest straw-colored light. She put it down again and found a box of, in case of emergencies, white wax candles, and thrust one into the candlestick. She put on an apple into the other pocket, and she picked up the ring of keys and took the old black key off the ring. She walked into the drawing room and looked at the door. She had the feeling that the door was looking at her, which she knew was silly, and knew on a deeper level was somehow true. She went back into her bedroom, rummaged in the pocket of her jeans, found the stone with a hole in it, and put it into her dressing room gown pocket. She lit the candle wick with a match and watched it sputter and light, and then she picked up the black key. It was cold in her hand. She had put it into a keyhole in the door, but did not turn the key. When I was a little girl, said Coraline to the cat, when we lived in our old house a long, long time ago, my dad took me for a walk on the wasteland between our house and the shops. It wasn't the best place to go for a walk, really. There were all these things that people had thrown away back there. Old cookers and broken dishes, and dolls with no arms or no legs, the empty cans and broken bottles. Mom and Dad made me promise not to go exploring back there. because there were too many sharp things and tetanus and such. But I kept telling him I wanted to explore it. So one day my dad put his big brown boots and his gloves and put my boots on me and my jeans and sweater, and we went for a walk. We must have walked for about 20 minutes. We went down the hill to the bottom of a gully where a stream was, when my dad suddenly said to me, "Coraline, run away, up the hill, now." He said in a tight sort of way, urgently, so I did. I ran way up the hill. Something hurt me on the back of my arm as I ran, and I kept running. As I got to the top of the hill, I heard someone thundering up the hill behind me. It was my dad, charging like a rhino. When he reached me, he picked me up in his arms, swept me over the edge of the hill, and then we stopped and we puffed and we panted, and we looked back down the gully. The air was alive with yellow wasps. They must have stepped on a wasp's nest in the rotten branch as we walked, and while I was running up the hill, my dad stayed and got stung to give me time to run away. His glasses had fallen off when he ran. I only had the one sting on the back of my arm. He had 39 stings all over him. We counted later in the bath. The black cat began to wash his face and whiskers in a manner that indicated increasingly impatience. Coraline reached down and stroked the back of its head and neck. The cat stood up, walked several paces until it was out of her reach, then sat down and looked up at her again. "So," said Coraline. Later that afternoon, my dad went back again to the wasteland to get his glasses back. He said if he left it another day, he would be able to remember where they'd fallen. And soon he got home wearing his glasses. He said that he wasn't scared when he was standing there, and the wasps were stinging him and hurting him, and he was watching me run away because he knew he had to give me enough time to run, or the wasp would have come after both of us. Coraline turned the key in the door. It turned with a loud clunk. The door swung open. There was no brick wall on the other side of the door, only darkness. A cold wind blew through the passageway. Coraline made no move to walk through the door, and he said that wasn't brave of him doing that, just standing there and being stung, said Coraline to the cat. It wasn't brave because he wasn't scared. It was the only thing he could do. But going back again to get his glasses, when he knew the wasps were there, when he really was scared, that was brave. She took her first step down the corridor, and she could smell dust and damp and mustiness. The cat padded along behind her. "And why was that?" asked the cat, although it sounded barely interested. "Because," she said, "when you're scared, but you still do it anyways, that's brave." The candle cast huge, strange, flickering shadow along the wall. She heard something moving in the darkness beside her or to one side of her. She could not tell. It seemed as if she was keeping pace with her, whatever it was. "And that's why you're going back to her world then?" said the cat. "Because your father once saved you from wasps?" "Don't be silly," said Coraline. "I'm going back for them because they're my parents. And if they noticed I was gone, I'm sure they would do the same for me. You know, you're talking again." "How fortunate I am," said the cat, "in having a traveling companion of such wisdom and intelligence." Its tone remained sarcastic, but its fur was bristling and its brush of a tail stuck up in the air. Coraline was going to say something like sorry or wasn't it a lot shorter walk the last time, when the candle went out as suddenly as it had been snuffed by someone's hand. There was a scrambling and a pattering, and Coraline could feel her heart pounding against her ribs. She put out one hand and felt something wispy, like a spider's web, brush her hand and her face. At the end of the corridor, the electric light went on, blinding after the darkness. A woman stood silhouetted by the light, a little ahead of Coraline. "Coraline, darling," she said. "Mum," said Coraline as she ran forward, eager and relieved. "Darling," said the woman, "why'd you ever run away from me?" Coraline was too close to stop. She felt the other mother's cold arms enfold her. She stood there, rigid and trembling, as the other mother held her tightly. Where are my parents?" Coraline asked it. "We're here," said the other mother, in a voice so close to a real mother's that Coraline could scarcely tell them apart. "We're here. We're ready to love you and play with you and feed you and make your life interesting." Coraline pulled back, and the other mother let her go with reluctance. The other father, who had been sitting on a chair in the hallway, stood up and smiled. "Come on into the kitchen," he said. "I'll make us a midnight snack, and you'll want something to drink. Hot chocolate, perhaps?" Coraline walked down the hallway until she reached the mirror at the end. There was nothing reflected in it but a young girl in her dressing gown and slippers who looked like she had recently been crying, but whose eyes were real eyes, but not button eyes, who was holding tightly to a burned-out candle in a candlestick. She looked at the girl in the mirror, and the girl in the mirror looked back at her. I will be brave, thought Coraline. No, I am brave. She put down the candlestick and then turned around. The other mother and the other father were looking at her hungrily. I don't need a snack, she said. I have an apple, see? And she took an apple from her dressing gown pocket and then bit into it with relish and enthusiasm that she did not really feel. The other father looked disappointed. The other mother smiled, showing a full set of teeth, and each of the teeth was a tiny bit long. The light in the hallway made her black button eyes glitter and gleam. You don't frighten me, said Coraline, although they did frighten her very much. I want my parents back. The world seems to shimmer a little at the edges. Whatever would I have done with your old parents? If they have left you, Coraline, it must be because they become bored with you or tired. Now, I will never become bored with you, and I will never abandon you. You will always be safe here with me. The other mother's wet-looking black hair drifted around her head like the tentacles of a creature in the deep ocean. They weren't bored of me, said Coraline. You're lying. You stole them. Silly, silly Coraline. They are fine wherever they are. Coraline simply glared at the other mother. I'll prove it, said the other mother, and brushed the surface of her mirror with her long, white fingers. It clouded over as if the dragons had breathed on it, and then it cleared. In the mirror, it was daytime already. Coraline was looking at the hallway all the way down to her front door. The door opened from outside, and Coraline's mother and father walked inside. They carried suitcases. That was a fine holiday, said Coraline's mother. How nice is it not to have Coraline anymore, said her mother with a happy smile. Now we can do all the things we always wanted to do, like go abroad, but we were prevented from doing by having a little daughter. And, said her father, I take great comfort in knowing that her other mother will take better care of her than we ever could. The mirror fogged and faded and reflected the night once more. See, said her other mother. No, said Coraline, I don't see, and I don't believe it either. She hoped that what she'd just seen was not real, but she was not certain as she sounded. There was a tiny doubt inside her, like maggots in the apple core. Then she looked up and saw the expression on her other mother's face, a flash of real anger, which crossed her face like summer lightning. And Coraline was sure in her heart that what she had seen in the mirror was no more than an illusion. Coraline sat down on the sofa and ate her apple. Please, said her other mother, don't be difficult. She walked into the drawing room, clapped her hands out twice, and there was a rustling noise, and a black rat appeared, and it stared up at her. Bring me the key, she said. The rat chittered, and then it ran through the open door that led back to Coraline's own flat. The rat returned, dragging the key behind it. Why don't you have your own key on this side? Asked Coraline. There's only one key, only one door, said the other father. Hush, said other mother. You must not bother our darling Coraline's head with such trivialities. She put the key in the keyhole and twisted. The lock was stiff, but it clunked and closed. She dropped the key into her apron pocket. Outside, the sky had begun to lighten into a luminous gray. If we aren't going to have a midnight snack, said the other mother, we still need our beauty sleep. I'm going back to bed. Coraline, I would strongly suggest that you do the same. She placed her long, white fingers on the shoulder of the other father, and she walked him out of the room. Coraline walked over to the door at the far corner of the drawing room, and she tugged on it, but it was tightly locked. The door of her other parents' bedroom was now closed. She was indeed tired, but she did not want to sleep in the bedroom. She did not want to sleep under the same roof as her other mother. The front door was not locked. Coraline walked out into the dawn and down the stone stairs. She sat down on the bottom step. It was cold. Something furry pushed itself against her side, and in one smooth, insinuating motion, Coraline jumped and then breathed a sigh of relief when she saw what it was. Oh, it's you, she said to the black cat. See, said the cat. It wasn't so hard recognizing me, was it? Even without names. Well, what if I wanted to call you? The cat wrinkled its nose and managed to look unimpressed. Calling cats, it confided, tend to be a rather overrated activity. Might as well call a whirlwind. What if it was dinner time? Asked Coraline. Wouldn't you want to be called then? Of course, said the cat, but a simple cry of dinner would do nicely. See? No need for names. Why does she want me? Said Coraline asked the cat. Why does she want me to stay here with her? She wants something to love, I think, said the cat. Something that isn't her. She might want something to eat as well. It's hard to tell with creatures like that. Do you have any advice? Asked Coraline. The cat looked as if it were about to say something else sarcastic. Then it flicked its whiskers and said, Challenge her. There's no guarantee she'll play fair, but her kind of thing loves games and challenges. What kind of thing is that? Asked Coraline. But the cat made no answer, simply stretched luxuriously and walked away. Then it stopped, turned, and said, I'd go inside if I were you. Get some sleep. You have a long day ahead of you. And then the cat was gone. Still, Coraline realized it had a point. She crept back into the silent house, past the closed bedroom door, inside which the other mother and the other father. What? She wondered. Slept? Waited? And then it came to her that she should open the bedroom door. She would find it empty, more precisely, that was an empty room, and it would remain empty until the exact moment she opened the door. Somehow that made it easier. Coraline walked into the green and pink parody of her own bedroom. She closed the door and hauled the toy box in front of it. It would not keep anyone out, but the noise somebody would make trying to dislodge it would wake her up, she hoped. The toys in the toy box were still mostly asleep, and they stirred and muttered as she moved their boxes. And then they went back to sleep. Coraline checked under the bed, looking for rats, but there was nothing there. She took off her dressing gown and slippers and climbed into bed and fell asleep, with barely enough time to reflect as she did so on what the cat could have meant by a challenge. Okay, so we're gonna end there today. Kind of learned some bad things about Other Mother, aren't we? She's not nice, but she still wants Coraline to stay, and she took Coraline's parents and lied to her about it. But she's sleeping in the other house, and she has a challenging day, the cat said, the next day. So like I said, we're going to stop there. Until next time, hope you're enjoying the book Coraline by Neil Gaiman. Bye.